This is not political. This is not trying to gaslight a nation into believing that racism doesn't exist. This is purely and utterly about highlighting the disgusting DEI policies inherent within our institutions that have now allowed the murder of Henry Nowak, an 18-year-old boy with his whole future ahead of him. Government policy after government policy after government policy has allowed this to happen. Every single police officer at the scene and all of their senior police officers in the chain of command must be under investigation, must be arrested, and as the harrowing body cam footage shows, should be held account for their actions. Hello, it's Paul Cox here, and this is the story of Henry Nowak, the 18-year-old boy who was killed by DEI. Many of you would have seen the story. Many of you will have an understanding of the story depending on how you consumed the news. Many of the legacy, left-leaning, progressive media have failed to tell you the story because to them it's incredibly embarrassing. But we don't care for that anymore, do we? That's no longer important to us. It's not been important to us for a very long time. But behind this story is a kind, ambitious, intelligent young man with his whole life ahead of him, having just started university. Henry was an 18-year-old student from Chafford 100 who only recently started university. He was studying accountancy and finance at the University of Southampton in Hampshire and was described by his family and friends and fellow students as a bright, sociable and heavily involved in social life. He had achieved strong A-level results and was excited about university life. He had played football for 2 different university teams and had quickly made a large circle of friends. In fact, it was these friends that he was socialising with on the night of his very premature death. Alongside his studies, he worked at the local Morrison's supermarket. His family described him as a kind, intelligent, talented young man, while friends and teammates remembered him as someone who was very easy to get along with and well liked. On the night of the 3rd of December 2025, Henry had been out celebrating the end of the first semester of his very first university year with fellow football teammates. While walking home in the Portswood area of Southampton, he became involved in an encounter with 23-year-old Vikram Digwa. Henry was stabbed and died later at the scene. This case has drawn national attention because officers initially handcuffed Henry after the attacker and his brother falsely claimed to be the victim of a racial assault. Hampshire Police later apologised, stating that Henry was the victim and that the police response was under independent investigation. We're going to discover a lot more about the police and those police officers at the scene of this tragic death of Henry Nowak as we go through this video. Because, as I alluded to in the title of this video, this is not a boy that was just killed by Vikram Digwa. This is a boy that was killed at the hands of the Hampshire Police because of the indoctrination of DEI policy. What stands out most from the accounts of people who knew him was how ordinary and promising his life was. Much like you, much like I, much like our children, our grandchildren. He had begun university and was making new friends, playing football, working part-time, and planning his future when his life was cut short. A story we've heard many times. But if you are a patron of the legacy media, you read newspapers that want to tell you a certain narrative, the BBC or ITV or Sky News, this may have even passed you by. Because the one thing that stood out about Henry, particularly in the eyes of these police officers, is he was white and the perpetrator of his crime was not. The court heard that Henry Nowak's killing began as a chance encounter while he was walking home after a night out with friends and football teammates in Southampton on the 3rd of December 2025. He was only 18 years old and his first semester of university. According to the prosecution, Henry was recording a Snapchat video as he walked home when he encountered Victim Digwa, who was openly carrying a 21-centimetre blade in addition to a smaller religious kirpan. A video recovered from Henry's phone captured part of the encounter. In it, Henry challenged Digwa after Digwa referred to himself as a bad man. And Digwa replied, "I am a bad man." Shortly afterwards, the stabbing occurred. The jury heard that Digwa stabbed Henry 5 times. The wounds included injuries to the back of Henry's legs and a fatal stab wound to the chest that penetrated his heart and caused catastrophic internal bleeding. Prosecutors said Henry was unarmed as he tried to get away after being wounded. Evidence presented at the trial indicated that instead of immediately seeking help, Digwa filmed Henry whilst he was injured. A major issue during the trial was Digwa's claim that Henry had racially abused him, punched him, and knocked off his turban. Something later to be proven entirely fabricated, causing him to act in self-defence. Digwa repeated that account to the police on a number of occasions. The prosecution described those allegations as a wicked lie. The jury rejected Digwa's self-defence account and found him guilty of murder. Incredibly, when officers arrived, Digwa told them that he was the victim of a racist assault. As a result, police initially treated Henry as the suspect. I'll repeat that. Digwa told them that he had been the victim of a racist assault, and as a result, the police initially treated Henry as the suspect. Just allow that to sink in. In fact, it may not even seem that unusual to you now, but ask yourself why. Why? Why is the claim, the accusation of racism far greater than a young man dying on the floor in front of those police officers? Body-worn camera footage showed Henry saying he had been stabbed and repeatedly struggling to breathe whilst he was handcuffed. Officers later realised he had suffered a life-threatening chest wound, but he died at the scene despite emergency treatment. Hampshire Police later apologised, and the incident is under investigation by the Independent Office of Police Conduct. Digwa was convicted of murder and possession of a bladed article in public. His mother, Karan Kaur, was convicted of assisting an offender. Digwa received a life sentence with a minimum of 21 years before parole can be considered. 21 years. 21 years. Right now, Digwa's in his early 20s. He'll be in his early 40s in 21 years' time. Is that punishment? Has he been afforded leniency because of the colour of his skin? Well, evidence would suggest so, because white people being convicted of the same crime have on average received a larger sentence, 25 years plus. So why the leniency in this case? It's of national concern. Are we still, is our justice system still co-opted and indoctrinated by DEI? And is the colour of Digwe's skin more important than the colour of Henry Nowak's skin? An independent police investigation is underway, and it must be conducted as soon as possible. But I have no faith, as I'm sure you do, that this independent report will tell us anything new, or, I suspect, lead to change. That change will have to come politically. One of the details that drew the most public attention was that Henry's own phone captured part of the encounter, and that police initially believed Digwe's account rather than Henry's. Again, I'm going to repeat that. The police initially believed Digwe's account rather than Henry Nowak's account, leading to the unusual and highly criticised situation in which the dying victim was handcuffed whilst the attacker was initially treated as the complainant. In my research, that word unusual came up time and time again, which is why I inserted it. But I don't, on a personal level, believe that it was in any way unusual. I suspect there are tens, if not hundreds, of crimes of similar nature across the UK in the last 10 to 20 years that have taken the word of somebody who doesn't have white skin over a white-skinned victim. This is not political. This is not trying to gaslight a nation into believing that racism doesn't exist. This is purely and utterly about highlighting the disgusting DEI policies inherent within our institutions that have now allowed the murder of Henry Nowak, an 18-year-old boy with his whole future ahead of him. Government policy after government policy after government policy has allowed this to happen. Every single police officer at the scene and all of their senior police officers in the chain of command must be under investigation, must be arrested, and as the harrowing body cam footage shows, should be held account for their actions. I have toed and froed, struggled, fought with my own conscience on whether I should show you here on this video the footage of that body cam. It's incredibly disturbing. Many of you might not actually be ready to see it, but that's not for me to decide. However, one thing that's not ready to see it or allow me to share it is the YouTube algorithm. Make of that what you will. So, in the video description below, I will leave a link to the footage and you can make the decision whether you want to see it or not. Viewer discretion is something that I highly advise. What you will see as part of it is an 18-year-old boy pleading for his life, and police officers who in my mind could have potentially saved his life, irrespective of what anyone else will tell you, because nobody knows whether that boy's life could be saved or not. But I suspect that that boy would have stood a much greater chance had, on arrival by the police officers, they taken him seriously and not looked at the skin colour of the murderer and the skin colour of the victim and made a judgment based on their training. Imagine. In fact, you no longer need to imagine. This is now our reality. It is no wonder that right-wing politicians are scrambling to make sure that this story is heard. It's no wonder that GB News and Talk TV and television stations not afraid to break narrative, not afraid to challenge the doctrine, not afraid to challenge the weak DEI equality policies of our legal institutions and beyond. Because this can never, ever happen again. It's a tragedy. Henry was a bright young man with a bright future ahead of him. And that's not just me saying that because I've read research about Henry Nowak. Take a look now at the way his family have handled this. My condolences go to each and every one of his family, of course, and his friends, and those directly impacted by this tragic murder. But here's Henry's father after court yesterday.
I am Henry Nowak's father. To my left is my daughter Olivia Nowak, Henry's older sister, and to her left is Lucy Ross, Henry's Nowak's mother. The jury confirmed what we've always known. Henry's life was taken from him unlawfully, violently, and without justification. Henry was 18 years old. He was kind, ambitious, loved and full of promise. He had his whole life ahead of him, a degree to finish, places to see, and a future to build. That future was stolen from him, and no verdict or sentence will ever give it back. Henry did nothing wrong. He was one of the kindest, friendliest, and most inclusive people you could ever hope to meet. He was amazing in every way. On the 3rd of December last year, Henry was walking home from a night out with his university football teammates when he encountered Vikram Digwa, a man openly carrying a large knife on the streets of Britain. That knife was used to take Henry's life. He should have been safe walking home. Instead, he became another young life lost to the brutal reality of knife crime in this country. Henry had been stabbed multiple times, and as his chest filled with blood, he tried to escape. He was chased, abused, and filmed by Vikram Digwa and others. When police arrived, Henry was lying on the floor, barely able to sit up and plainly in severe medical distress. With his final words, he told officers that he could not breathe. He told them he had been stabbed. In fact, Henry told officers that he could not breathe 9 times. He told them he had been stabbed 4 times. The response from one officer was, "I don't think you have, mate." The police have said they were misled by the murderer and that the scene when they arrived was complex. Unfortunately, it seems to us the truth is much simpler. The police were told by our son himself and by a member of the public who called 999 that they heard someone shout that they had been stabbed. But the police did not believe them. Henry was pulled across the gravel, his hands forced behind his back, and he was placed in handcuffs. Instead of being treated as a dying victim, police formally arrested Henry for assault and read him his rights. That was the last thing he heard. Henry did not die with dignity. He did not die with the care he deserved. He lost consciousness before anyone believed him. Let me be absolutely clear. We hold Vikram Digwa solely and 100% responsible for the brutal murder of our son. But Henry should not have died on the streets of Southampton in police custody. The way he was treated was inhumane and degrading. His murderer, however, was afforded decency. He was believed. He was not handcuffed when arrested. He was not handcuffed when transported to the police station. As far as we understand, he was never handcuffed at all. And, as Vikram Digwa himself told the court, whilst under arrest for Henry's murder, police even took him to the kitchen so he could choose his food. The contrast is unbearable. We believe the officers involved remain on duty, although we understand some may have since resigned. One was allowed to leave the force before she had given an account to the Independent Office of Police Conduct of what happened that evening. The IOPC investigation remains ongoing. Whilst we await its final report, we are calling on the Home Secretary to ensure that the IOPC has the resources, authority and independence it needs to conduct a full, fearless and transparent investigation. Our families should not have to fight for the truth anymore. Despite the shocking actions of the police on that fatal night, the murder investigation was very different. We would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to Senior Investigating Officer DCI Rebecca Bartholomew, the Serious Crime Team, and particular officer in the case, Claire Proctor. We would also like to thank our incredible family liaison officers, Sarah Page and Trudy May, for their diligence, professionalism and compassion throughout this investigation. We would also like to thank the CPS, as well as Nick Lobenberg, KC and Neil King, for their outstanding advocacy skills in prosecuting this case. In our darkest period of our lives, knowing that people were fighting tirelessly for Henry gave us strength. They secured justice for our son, and for that, our family will be forever grateful. For us, there is no closure. There is no moment where the pain stops. There is no moment where the Henry-shaped hole in our family is filled. We will carry this grief every single day for the rest of our lives. But today matters. Today, Henry was believed. The truth has been recognized. Today, justice, in the eyes of the law, has been served. But justice alone is not enough. We want to use Henry's heartbreaking story to make change for the better. We do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred, or tension. We want his story to make our streets safer for everyone. That is why we are calling on the government to treat knife crime as the national emergency that it is. We need real solutions. We need investment in prevention. We need stronger action on the sale, the ownership and carrying of all knives. And as this case so painfully demonstrates, we need common sense applied to our laws. This doesn't mean knee-jerk reactions. This doesn't mean going to extremes. It just means a common sense approach to law and order. As the KC for the prosecution summed up in court, this is not a case about Sikhism. This is not a case about racism. This is a case about murder. People should not be able to walk openly through the streets of Britain carrying a 21-centimetre blade. As a family, we will not let this go. No other family should experience the heartbreak and horror of losing a child to knife crime. Finally, I want Henry to know, wherever he is, we are so proud of him and we love him beyond words. Thank you.
I'm sure, like many of you out there, I'm a dad. My daughter has family, a mother who care about her deeply, and I can't imagine the pain they're going through, or indeed the courage it took for Henry's brave father to make such a poignant, eloquent, factual, wholesome account of his son Henry. And it's difficult now, even though I've seen that a number of times, and I'm sure you have too. And his family have dealt with this incredibly, and they're asking for an independent inquiry to happen as soon as quickly, and all the resources possible to be driven towards it, and that is what must happen. The decorum his family have shown is exquisite. I commend them for it. However, I don't think I'm going to be able to say, I don't think I'm going to be able to show quite the same decorum. And maybe none of us should. Maybe on behalf of Henry, his father and his mother, his siblings, and his loved ones, it's time for us to make a noise, to show cool, determined rage against the institutions, the policies, the politicians, the police, the authorities that have helped Henry's murderer, Digwa, carry out this crime. Because that is what they've done. Without DEI, without this incessant drive towards the equality of outcome, the degradation of white people at the benefit of anyone else, any minority, any victim, has led to the death of Henry Nowak. We must see action. We must see a great repeal of the blob, the policies, the ludicrousy, the stupidity, the naivety of this absolute woke nonsense. Let's not be violent. We're not Digwa. We're not his family. We don't carry knives. We don't seek to harm people because they're different to us. We're not the online intelligentsia, the overly progressive grifters who will tell you that you're wrong and that none of this is true. Well, what happened yesterday in Southampton Crown Court, and tragically to Henry Nowak on the 3rd December 2025, has destroyed their narrative. It holds no legitimacy any longer. These people must stand down. These people must be quiet. And the victims and the families must now be heard. And those that have showed great strength over the years to continue to talk about this and highlight it for what it is must now be heard. If you're someone who has done as I have done, talked about this openly at my own risk, and by the way, I am nothing by the comparison to the great giants of the right-wing media. But we all collectively have a responsibility now. And I plead with you to take it incredibly seriously. It's not just me. It's not just those presenters. It's not just those campaigners. You could be left-leaning or ultra-progressive watching this, wondering what on earth I'm talking about. Well, I plead to you to take a moment of reflection. When those police officers arrived at the scene, they believed Digwa and his ridiculous and disgusting accusations of racism over the pleas of a dying white boy. Because they have been trained They have been co-opted. They have been gaslit into believing that this is the real crime. Racism is the real crime. It's not. It's nowhere near as important as Henry's life. It's nowhere near as huge as the pain that Henry's family feel. And I'm not here to put words in their mouth. They have their own campaign, their own struggle, and they will live a sentence for the rest of their life now. But make no mistake, without DEI, without woke progressive politics and policies, without the Green Party, without the Labour Party, without elements of the Tories, without elements of the Lib Dems, without every single director, senior manager within institutions, within the blob, within the civil service, this murder wouldn't happen. Because the police officer would turn up and he would make no judgment based on the colour of somebody's skin. He would make no judgment based on some absolute disgusting accusation. He, she, they would make a judgment based on what they could see. An agitated brown man over the body of a dying white boy. And they would take the appropriate action that may have saved Henry Nowak's short life. Look at Henry's family. If you're the person who is always making judgments about people based on their background, oh, they look like they're from a council estate, oh, they're not educated, we've been to university, we know more. You know nothing. You know absolutely nothing. Henry's family, they know everything now. Much thanks to you believing this absolute hypocrisy. George Floyd, Black Lives Matter 2020. Millions of people on the street across the West. George Floyd was a career criminal. George Floyd's system was full of drugs. It doesn't justify the police action. But is he really the hero? And you're silent about Henry Nowak? Deep reflection. That's what I ask of anybody who doesn't believe in this. Deep reflection. And perhaps just a moment of silence so that we don't have to hear your horseshit day in, day out on X about how all these other things matter and white people don't. How have we got here? How has this been allowed? God bless Henry Nowak. God bless his family. And God bless anyone willing to stand up against this now. Until next time, take care.